Hello and welcome to post-match reaction to the Blues versus the Highlanders. It finished 24-12 to the Highlanders, but it was a really strange game in some ways. In the first half, the Blues really dominated and they chose to go to the corner quite a few times, but kept on failing to capitalise from that. Players who were having a good half from the Highlanders, well, basically the forwards and Liam Coltman in particular. He got a couple of early turnovers, which were very impressive. And it was all Blues for pretty much most of that first half. In the first sort of 15 or so minutes, the Highlanders line-out stuttered a couple of times. They lost a couple of line-outs. After that, both sets of set piece did pretty well. But for all of that dominance, basically the Blues kept on getting turned over or making errors, and that meant that they got nothing on the scoreboard. And that's the only stat that matters, isn't it? Let's be honest, is points on the board, and they really did fail to do that. The Highlanders, when they did get their few attacking opportunities, were getting held up into mauls, and those got turned over, and that was generally the good defence by the Blues. Eventually, Nonu spots he's got two forwards in front of him, dummies, then goes through the gap, draws the defenders nicely, passes about, but pass out to Robinson, who goes over to score, and it's 5-0 on 22 minutes. Ruru then gets the restart, gets the ball, and gets taken out as he's trying to kick it after a couple of phases, because the ball was out of the ruck, and that meant that players could come and get at him. That kick he managed to squirt over the back of his own in goal, and luckily Caleb Clark was the first one there with Ben Smith and another Highlanders player on him. So that so easily could have been a try pretty much straight from the restart. As it was, there was a 5-metre scrum from that for the Highlanders, and eventually Frizzell managed to dive over after the Blues had a pretty good scrum. Actually, the Blues for that first half basically were dominant at scrum time, and really could have, really should have got more out of that. Blues pressuring away on the Highlanders line, and then, but they get intercepted, and the Highlanders go all the way down at the other end of the pitch. But they butcher an overlap when basically the player has no one in front of him. He can't catch the ball, knocks it on, and otherwise the Highlanders should have scored on half-time. Either way, in a half where they really were under the cosh for the majority of it, and the stats say, sorry, let's bring up the stats here. The stats say that the Blues, it says it's only 58% territory in possession, but it felt a lot more than that, and they were much more. It felt they were much more in control of that half. But to say for the Highlanders, really, the Blues really should have been up 2 or 3 tries by that stage. Instead, they found themselves down by 2 points in there. Come the second half, and the Highlanders came out and played an awful lot better and basically dominated the half. Got themselves a penalty try at scrum time. So up until that point, the Blues had been pretty strong at scrum time, but then the Highlanders turned the screw and just on a 5-metre scrum. And try to push over the Blues. I don't know if the Blues flankers were thinking about peeling off and covering players rather than pushing, which you can often do in that kind of situation, or whether but the Highlanders really did a good job there. That made it 14-5, and the Blues basically after on about 49 minutes, basically after that point, the Blues kind of fell apart until the last 2 minutes of the game. Was it tiredness? Was it basically just getting dispirited by the fact that the Blues haven't won since 2013? I thought, I saw someone put in a tweet, away from home against New Zealand side, and basically I think they knew that tonight the game was not going to go their way. On 55 minutes, the Fadders got a one-handed intercept and went all the way. Was he onside? Was he offside? Was he onside? Hey, it doesn't really matter because that's the way the ref gave it. But that made 20-5 after 55 minutes, and basically, that was it. Game over. Obviously, the Highlanders need to keep on playing, and they did keep on playing. They kept on pushing. They didn't get much reward, just one penalty to make it 24-5. And there was another time when Fadders got two hands to the ball and nearly intercepted it. And when you think about it, we had that interception just before half-time as well. Yeah, the Blues really, the ball's too slow off the back of rucks in that first half. And in the second half, they got turned over at ruck time far too often. The ruck was the Blues' real problem in this game. That allowed the defence to get up in their faces, and really they struggled to get over the gain line a lot. In the last minute, they did manage to break out, and it was gone black. The player Sam Nock was charging towards the line, got tackled, it slipped up and got penalised as a high tackle. As that was the last defender, I think that should have been a penalty try. To be honest, the next player was not going to catch him before he got into the corner. As it was, a quickly taken penalty was Plummer did a crossfield kick. Now I collected it and scored. Quick drop goal, and there was time for restart, but it all came to nothing, and it finished 24-12. As I say, in this one, the Blues dominated the first half, but just didn't get the points on the board that their territory, that their possession really said that they should have done, and that's where this game was won and lost. In the second half, the Highlanders came through. But you've got to say, there was lots of talk on. But when we look at the stats, when they're very even, 10 scrums each, 11 lineouts to the Highlanders, 8 to the Blues, but 2 were lost by the Highlanders. Both 87-88% tackling, with 150 and 132 attempted tackles each. 7 and 8 penalties conceded. The real difference in this game was that finishing, was the fact the Blues just couldn't finish in that first half. Whereas the Highlanders managed to put away more of their opportunities. Not all of them, by any stretch of the imagination. The Highlanders left points out there as well, but they put away enough of their opportunities to take the lead, to take that. I mean, the Blues had more metres running with ball in hand, etc. And that was there was talk by the commentators that the Blues strike players had been handled well on attack. So you're talking about players like Nanai. But he got 91 metres carrying with ball in hand off 41 carries. Ione, 13 carries for 112 metres. Those guys did get a lot of ball and a lot of metres. Nonu, 10 carries, 65 metres. So these guys got in the game and they got forward. They just couldn't finish off the job. It wasn't. The backs did pretty well. The forwards, on the other hand, a different ball game with ball in hand. Akira Ioane, only 2 carries for no metres gained. Dodge Papali'i did pretty well with 4 carries for 27, and Robinson for 5 carries for 19. But most of that Robinson one was the try he scored, to be fair. But any other players like Tuipulotu and Kauli Tuatoti in the engine room, they're 7 carries for 9 metres for Tuipulotu and 9 for 11. Those guys really just went nowhere. And you've got to say that the Highlanders' defence in that first half, against in the tight channels against the forwards, meant the Blues didn't get over the gain line, didn't get the go forward, and so when they did go wide and they had the breaks, the Highlanders still had players available to cover those breaks. So big shift of works by Lenchi's 17 tackles. But I mean, if we go across the forwards, Dixon 11, Lenchi 17. Frizzell 12, Franklin 10, Hemapo 15, Lomax 12. I mean, a lot of tackles being taken. The Hemapo missed 4, to be fair to him, but he still did 15 tackles in the engine room. A big shift of work by those guys. Also, Walden and Tomkinson did a good job in midfield with 9 and 7 tackles each. They kept that Nonu and I've gone blank off the top of my head. TJ Fayani in check. As Hologram says in the live chat there, Blues got killed out the rucks. And yes, they did. That was where they got turned over a lot. So Lomax was a big part of that with the turnovers he created. Unfortunately, I don't have those stats to hand. And I just don't. I mean, one of those things I've not used is turnovers, because it's 15-19 on turnovers, but it was only like 6 turnovers during the first half for the Blues, and that felt totally wrong. The numbers were way higher than that one. So, yes, there are more turnovers, slightly more turnovers there by the Blues than the Highlanders. I think those will get corrected probably in the rewatch, and we'll find that actually the Blues turned over the ball a lot more. They just couldn't control that ruck, as I was saying earlier. On on attack for the Highlanders, it was their forwards managed to do much better. So you got Elliot Dixon, 7 carries, 15 metres. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 2 metres each time. So that means he's getting over that gain line. Frizzell, 11 for 37. Again, getting over that gain line. Hemapo, 9 for 23. You got this. They were getting over that gain line, getting enough metres to create space for the backs. Tompkinson, Fadders both had big games. Fadders, obviously, with that intercept, he had a long range one there. And I'm not sure if Tompkinson was one that intercepted towards the end of the first half as well. So you got to say these a lot of those metres were from intercepts. We talked about the defending already of the Highlanders. Discipline was fine. On the Blues side, slightly less tackles and slightly less needed to be done by the forwards. Kiriwani only got through 7. Papali'i 17 got through a lot of work. Tom Robinson, Kali Tuati, and Ofa Tuangafasi actually came on and did a lot of work. It was an early injury replacement with 14 tackles there. So they got out wide more. TJ Fiani missed a couple of tackles but made 7. It was those breaks, those intercepts, and the ruck that were the big problem for this Blues side. Was there a discipline issue? TJ Fiani also gave up a couple of penalties as well. So TJ, has been looking really good this season. A bit of a quiet game tonight. Got on the wrong side of the ref for a couple of things there. Players like Caleb Clark as well. Another player that didn't. I mean, he did very well to save that try, but he'll learn from this how to get more involved in games going forwards. You'd think. So the Blues go on and don't. And it's another away game where they haven't picked up the win against a New Zealand side. I say it really felt that. So in that first half they couldn't control the rucks. In the second half they got dispirited and fell apart. What does that mean for the tables? Well, the Blues still sat in third currently in the New Zealand Conference on 20 points. The Highlanders now on 18 points. Closing that right up. I think as long as this has been updated. If it hasn't, they'll be switching places, obviously. The Blues now in 7th overall, with the Highlanders closing it up closing up the gap to get into those wild card positions. They're just one point behind. The Jaguars now in a very congested mid-table there. Jaguars on 19, Reds on 18, Stormers on 18. Highlanders on 18, Chiefs on 17. It's really getting congested in that, in that middle table, fighting it out for those last wildcards for the playoffs. Up next is what should be a cracking news Aussie derby between the Waratahs and the Rebels, but I'm going to have to catch that tomorrow because I'm going to hit the sack as I'm getting up at 2 a.m. is the alarm going off to watch Saracens versus Munster in the European Champions Cup semi-final. I'll be doing a quick live chat after that game as well. So do join me back for then. Don't forget, up there will be, for those of you recording, will be somewhere where you can subscribe. Down there's a link to Patreon, how you can support me to become a supporter of the channel and help me bring all this content for free. And over there, a couple of videos that the artificial intelligence here at YouTube says you'll enjoy. So give them a watch.